think we're good. Looking good.
You got it zoomed in.
All right. Let's do this. All right. We're here.
All right.
We're at the Combat Base Garage in Redondo again. And going around, we got the CEO in the house.
In the house. Thank you.
Melissa Haueter. We got the venerable Chris Haueter. Suni Imhotep behind the lens.
Hello.
Tobin the producer. And today we are honored to be joined by the undisputed legend of action cinema, 6th degree BJJ black belt, Richard Norton.
Thank you.
Yay. Welcome.
Absolutely honored.
That
Yep.
was quite
Absolutely.
an intro. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Give that man another belt.
When I was younger and new in jiu-jitsu, Richard was like one of the kings of the arts. Like everybody knew Chuck Norris, Richard Norton, Dan Inosanto, and you guys were like the icons that we followed as young kids and growing up.
Do you know what the inference is? We're very old now. Basically,
Just a little bit.
that's basically what he said.
That's true. That's true. No, I remember realizing you were Australian because I didn't know that from your movie work. I didn't like a lot of actors are Australian, and I can't do a good Australian accent.
Yeah, no. Well, yeah. G'day, mate. How you going? I had to moderate a lot just because of living here, you know, because if you go, g'day, mate, how you going? What's your name, love? People go, what the fuck are you saying? You know, so we had to learn to slow it down a little bit, articulate a little more. Yeah.
I've always thought that the Australian accent, like the New York accent to the American South accent, I always think of the London accent to the Australian accent. It's almost like a country version of British English.
Yeah, actually, the easiest accent for us is to take on is Southern, just because they drop a lot of the ERs. You know, we don't say ever; it would be ever.
Right.
You know, and so it's a little more Southern.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
The hardest for me to understand are Scottish, Birmingham, England, those north ones.
Us
Yeah.
too.
I can't understand a word they're saying half the time.
My wife's born in Batley, Yorkshire. She was born in England. I can't understand a word she says.
That's normal.
Sweetie.
I'm not saying anything, but we're supposed to learn the Queen's English.
You see, we're getting lectured.
That's good. That's what wives are good for. No, okay, let's not get on that topic.
Oh, geez.
Moving along.
Okay, so I want to hear about the recent projects. So you had some projects in the last couple of years that were big Hollywood movies that you worked on, and tell us about it and what your role was in those movies. And
Yeah, look, I'm still acting, but the older you get, the less roles there are. So I, quite a while ago, gravitated more to behind the camera. So I've been working as a fight coordinator, which means your job is to help train the actors, choreograph a lot of the fights, and then make sure they look good on camera. So the biggest ones are, you know, well, going back a bit more than that was Mad Max Fury Road.
Which was a great film.
Amazing film.
God, that was a good film.
With the incredible Dr. George Miller, who's just like the sweetest man. You know, he's like the uncle you wish you had. And just a genius, you know. Every frame of those movies, like again, it was Fury Road, and then recently Furiosa with Anya Taylor-Joy, and Chris Hemsworth was fight coordinator on that as well. But working with him is just a joy, and you can imagine for an Aussie to be part of such an iconic action franchise, it just doesn't get better than that. And they're massive movies, but every frame of that movie's got George's fingerprints on it. Like there's not a rip or a tear in a costume or a dent on a vehicle that he's not aware of.
And like so many times when they remake an iconic 70s or 80s film, I'm crossing my fingers and holding my breath, expecting it'll suck. And that was like art. Like you're right. Every frame, like on the big screen, it was an incredible film.
No, and it's what we refer to as old school filmmaking, meaning that, like even for me, teaching, doing the choreography with Charlize Theron and Tom
Yep.
Hardy and all of that, no superfluous movements. If you're holding a spanner and you're hitting something, there's no twirls, there's no
Yeah.
showboating. He said it's got to be totally efficient. How do I get the job done with the least amount of moves? Because he would argue, yeah, you could be flashy and do this or throw a high kick, but why would you risk falling on your butt or dropping the weapon? So everything was, again, just to get the job done and move the story along. Plus, every stunt you see, not so much Fury, but even Fury, they have CGI or, you know, they'll create backgrounds, but every stunt is a real stunt man putting his life or her life on the line. I mean,
The car is still moving when you're falling on it.
crazy. And all those vehicles, they were all built from scratch.
They were cool.
Yeah, and just amazing with, you know, the big Giga Horse I was in had twin V8s. And,
Yeah.
I mean, that thing would move just like you think it would, seeing it in the movie.
Yeah.
So incredible mechanics. And originally Fury Road was going to be shot in Australia in the outback. And they rehearsed. In fact, we nearly shot it 3 years earlier than we did. But there was something to do with the American dollar and the exchange rate. And I think there was even a thought of Mel's involvement, you know.
Right.
Anyway, that sort of went by the wayside. We shot it 3 years later, but we were ready to shoot. We'd already rehearsed in Outback, Australia, and where Castlemaine, I think. Where were we, Jude? I forget. Anyway, they got unseasonable rains, and suddenly all this green shot up, you know, which it's supposed to be post-apocalyptic and barren. So, you know, in a nutshell, paraphrasing, they just put all the cars on a ship and off to South Africa. So it was all
That's where you
shot.
shot it. South Africa.
In South Africa. And Swakopmund was the actual place. And as soon as we flew there, I had to go there earlier because I had to train maybe 80 South African stunties as well and give a bit of an audition to pick out the right people for the roles. So I was there a long time. As soon as I landed, it was literally like landing in Outback Australia, like at Ayers Rock. I mean, it was flat, it was brown soil, no greenery or anything, even though, you know, when you get going, of course, you'll get that. But I thought, oh, no wonder he wants to shoot here. But incredible feat to just take the whole production, put it on a ship. I mean, you can't even imagine the cost. And here we are. And it was a phenomenal experience being in South Africa. I mean, I always dreamed of going there and going on a safari. You know, so some of the stunt guys, their parents had game lodges that take injured animals and lion. We got Judy and I got to play with like 3-day-old lion
baby lions.
We did that too, yeah.
We did that in Africa. God,
and I thought, who gets to do this?
I
It
know.
was just incredible
Martial artists.
experience.
Go figure.
I remember that baby lion's paw was as big as my hand. It was amazing, that little baby.
Yeah,
lion.
we went for a walk with a lioness. I think, what was it, maybe 3 months old. It was still quite big. And it's, you know, it would run away. And they warned us, the trainer or whatever said, look, just be careful. If she will come up and brush you, and don't let her push you, or because they're always trying to become the alpha. They're always trying to move up, so they test you. And he said also she'll run away, which she did, and hide behind some bushes and then mock charge you. But he said, importantly, even if it don't turn and start or flinch and
Then
move
they'll
away.
tackle you,
Yeah, so you just got to hold your ground, and she'd be like, then come up and sort of lick you. Amazing experience.
It was amazing.
But
at the time, they had
Tigers.
tigers, but
there.
they wouldn't let us pet them because they were meaner.
Yeah.
More independent individual than
because
unlike
they're
the
not
pack.
normally in Africa, of
No.
course.
Yeah,
Tigers.
just happen to
but-
have
in
some
Africa,
there.
Yeah, right. No, it was incredible experience, and the whole shoot was amazing. You know, obviously Tom Hardy in it. When we started a couple of years earlier, I actually got Tom into jiu-jitsu. You know, and he loved it, and as you know, he's since competed and done all this. And hats off to him to doing that. Amazing, but. He was sneaking out of, this is in Sydney, Australia, when we were doing rehearsals, and he would sneak out of script meetings with George. He said, "Come on, Rich, you've got to do some more jits." You know? So that was fun. Charlize was great. You know, she's the reason my head was shaved. I was, you know, I was doing everything to talk George out of shaving my head because I said I'll look like a racing tadpole. And, you know, so and I said, well, because we're imperators, we're like the same warrior class, we would have maybe hair and not be all skinny. And so it was all going pretty well until one rehearsal day, George said, oh, Richard, he used to talk very gently. And he's walking away. He said, I just want to show you this. Well, Charlize had sent a picture from LA rehearsing and her head shaved. So she decided to do that. She originally was supposed to have like long hair and all this sort of stuff. And she decided to shave it because she said, I'm a warrior woman. I wouldn't be worrying about all this hair.
Yeah.
So that was his way of telling me this has got to go. So I got it shaved and I said, I'm traumatized. I haven't had hair this short since I was born. You know, and when I eventually like started working with Charlize, I said, by the way, this is your fault. You know, and she grabs my cheek and said, "Oh, but look at those cheeks." It was very, yeah, cool.
So this job that you have on these movies, it sounds like you're kind of a coach that gets the actors who maybe don't have martial arts experience or have little martial arts experience to look like real, full-blown, skilled martial artists on camera. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and my job is to obviously read the script, and I work with Guy Norris, no relation to Chuck. I've worked with Guy for over 30 years. He was on the original Mad Max, the very first one. Incredible stuntman. He's second unit director and all that. So I work very closely with him. But the job is to look at the script and the character and then to base the fights on the skill set of that character, meaning you wouldn't teach Charlize to do a spinning heel kick or Tom because it'd be like, well, how the hell would he know how to do that? Like George was very adamant that Max is a military police background, so he would be more of a street fighter, you know. So that's the first thing you learn. Okay, well, that's in meaning that you don't want to. A lot of movies, I won't name them. You'll get all this drama, and then you'll get this ridiculous fight scene,
With
has
spinning
no
back kicks.
relationship to the actual character story, just because it looks good.
Yeah.
You know, again, George would have none of that. So then I've got to get them, knowing I only have X amount of time, is to just give them the tools that will be applicable to the character and to the fight scenes that we are choreographing. Meaning, I would say to them, I don't have time to turn you into a martial artist.
Yeah.
Just learn the skill set you need and then give them the confidence. A lot of them not having done it, you know. And part of it also, as I like to say, look, choreography for me is like notes of music. If it's not in tune, we just change it. Meaning what I would do, having trained, is not what you can or would look good doing.
Right.
So my job is to make them comfortable because they're the ones that have to be believable on screen. And of course you do have stunt doubles, you know, to do dangerous stuff. But a lot of fights, Guy would always want that we would have the actor doing 90% of their own, especially fight action.
Yeah.
Because then there's no compromise on camera angles and everything. You're not on the back of a stunt double's head, right? So I'm supposed to give them the tools, then teach them the choreography, and then basically be at the monitor, you know, with Guy and with George, of course, making sure they look good and to give them notes, you know, on whatever take they're doing and make sure they look the best version of them.
That's pretty
And
cool.
it's been, you know, having worked with Tom, with Charlize, and of course the Suicide Squads, you know, training Margot Robbie, who's just a dream, you know, she's so committed. I often say, people like Margot Robbie now, they said, it's no wonder they have the careers they have. It's their level of commitment. Like Suicide Squad or any of them.
Drive,
I'd say, Margot, just give me 15 minutes at the end of the day, you know, to work on coming fights. Could be a 10, 12-hour day. She would turn up every time, makeup on. And you would know when you teach. There's some people you teach that are going, oh, fuck, I'm doing this because I've been told to. And there's those that are hanging on everything because they just want to be the best version of them.
I helped on one film with Viggo Mortensen. And he was, I guess they call him method acting, or what he's doing. Like, and they warned me that he's going to be in a character when you train him.
Yes.
And he was an intense guy, like very nice, but like he was intense. He wanted to learn the art and make sure it worked.
No, and he there's stories of him, that sort, just when he's not working weekends, he would carry the sword with him everywhere, which of course you could get in a lot of trouble
Yeah.
for. I guess, but that's a type of actor he is. And some actors are like that. Some will just switch it on. And like, I was blessed to work with Scarlett Johansson for Ghost in the Shell. They sent me to New York to work with her, take her to a gun range, I understand. And then we found a martial arts studio to train her. Same thing, just totally committed, and funny, she's the greatest. But you could be mucking around with her. When I say mucking around, I don't mean mucking around, but I mean mucking around with her just before a shot. And as soon as you hear action, boom, she'd just switch on.
Right in. Okay.
Whereas others, what's the Joker?
Oh, I know. Wait, well, there's two of them.
No, first one.
Heath Ledger. No.
No.
Heath?
Joaquin,
No.
Ledger.
Joaquin Phoenix.
No.
No.
Oh God.
The one who passed away.
That was Heath Ledger.
No. There's one along Heath still. What's his name?
I know who you're talking about. Yes. What is his name? Oh God.
Oh God, I'm so embarrassed that I can't remember. Anyway, he's
Young man on the set.
he's a singer as well. He had a band and all that stuff.
Yes.
Wonderful actor. But
Great
But
guy.
he, for instance, you weren't allowed to call him by his first name. You had to call him Jay, a nickname for Joker, because Jared Leno.
Jared Leno. Yes.
Jared Leto.
Leto.
Yeah.
Oh God, listen to us.
I know this is terrible.
Like, it's age. See.
It's okay.
Jared Leto, but amazing to work with. Yeah, just total method actor and just in the moment, but also very aware. This is also part of my job. Is to make sure actors are safe, because there's a danger with getting dangerous moves.
Yeah.
What's the control? Like, are they so immersed in the character that they become dangerous to the other person? Like, there was a scene in the first one where Marga's on a stretcher before she becomes Harley Quinn, and it wasn't supposed to be in the scene, but the scene was changed so he puts a leather belt in her mouth and does this. She's on and I remember saying, I'm worried about that, because I didn't know Jared that well at that time. And I remember saying, look, I'm just a little concerned, could you just... And it's straight, even though he was, again, already the Joker, I said, no, thank you, no, absolutely, I'll be fine. And he just changed what they wanted, he just gently put it in her mouth and did the scene. And I thought, that's very cool. That's that's a professional. Like, yes, he's immersed in the character, but he's still aware of the practical elements of getting the scene and making it safe, Yeah, working with those, got to work with Will Smith, train Will Smith at his house for months before Suicide Squad. And I know, a lot of shit happened after that stuff. Right. But just a phenomenal guy, he's
the
team.
slap heard around the world.
Yeah, and I taught him a bit of that slap, but that's probably my fault. But he did, when he did it, he did lean away, thank God, because if you catch somebody here, could have been a lot worse. But anyway, but he was such a team builder. Like, he was the leader on Suicide Squad. Even the producer said, I've never seen an actor bring a cast and crew together like he did. He had a gym built. I was told he even spent $200,000 on building a gym in one of the warehouses we're in Canada, just for cast and crew to be able to work out and things like that, Yeah, he was. Last time I saw him, we were sitting at home, and the Australian Open was on, and there's Will Smith, and I text him, and we hung out for a few days, travel around. He's that sort of guy. So no, I've got a huge amount of time for Will. I mean, it's just unfortunate, the whole thing, and he did fuck up.
Whatever that. Yeah, I think both of them fucked up. Like, they both.
Yeah.
None of my business.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the other good thing with it for me with all those movies, which I know we'll get onto eventually, is Jiu-Jitsu. Not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but is that you get a chance to also share my passion. Do you know what I mean? I'm in their world. They're actors. They're passionate, but it's nice to infect them with a little bit of what we do, which I was able to do, as I said, with Tom. Didn't have not so much with Charlize, but Margot, trained her in a bit of jiu-jitsu. Scarlett, Anya Taylor-Joy for Furiosa, and I mean, that's always a thrill for me,
Yeah.
And it does, interestingly enough, in a bit of mutual respect, because I think I even said to Scarlett once, I said, look, if you're not going to commit 100%, that's how cheeky I was. I said, then don't waste my time. Not in a bad way,
Right.
but, and when they realize that I'm not on camera with those films, so all my job is to make them look the best they can look. And when that sinks, then it's a great relationship. And it's about trust, even the director said with Scarlett, said, oh, she just trusts you so much. So she'll do a scene and look at me, a fight scene, and sometimes they go, well, that was shit, she would laugh, but she would trust me to not let something go without at least being the best that I knew she was capable of,
That's really cool.
But it's a fun part of the job.
Where did your martial arts stuff start? Because you were doing martial arts long before jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
You've done tons of different stuff,
I
right?
started in 1961. So I was 11 years old, because I said I'm 75 now. But I started in judo. Judo was about the only thing we had in Australia there, aside from boxing, and things like even the wrestling was around then, but not martial arts per se, even though there were schools.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who moved into a house opposite where I lived in a suburb of Melbourne called Croydon. It was almost in the bush. And he moved in, we got to be friends. He was disappearing twice a week. And I was like, where are you going? He said, oh, I'm going to judo classes. And I was like, oh, shit, I want to go.
Yeah.
I want to do that. And I said, and it's the truth, back then the only knowledge I had of judo was literally on the back of comic books. Those ads of defeat 5 opponents with a flick of a finger
I
and all
loved those
this.
ads as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, or the beach bully getting sand kicked in their face. And so off I went to judo. I was so skinny and small as an 11-year-old, so I remember being like cannon fodder for the older teenagers in the class, getting chucked from one end of the dojo to
You
the other.
learned how to fall. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was, Mr. Burgess' name was, he was a cop, who taught. It was just a church hall, but a phenomenal introduction to martial arts, and it just ignited my passion. I thought, oh my God, how good is that? Cut to a friend of mine at school who was also in judo told us about a karate school that was going to open 3 miles from where I lived. And there was a bit of a demonstration. That man was Tino Seberano, who is considered now to be the father of Australian karate. He was Filipino, Hawaiian, came out, and he'd only been out 6 months, did this demo. We went along, and I was like, oh my God. And I literally said aloud in my own head, this is what I want to do with my life, And it was a very simple, fundamental demo, but and it wasn't, I wasn't in a rough neighborhood getting beaten up, the story of, oh, I had to learn to defend myself. Wasn't that. It was just, for me had this mystical lure, which back then martial arts had. It was superhuman. Of course,
I had that too. I absolutely had that. That was more than any other sport or thing. It's like, that's what I want to do. Whether it's wrestling, boxing, karate, jiu-jitsu, kung fu, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, and so, I just immediately joined up, and it just started a journey that's still going today. So it's like 63 years since that. And it's, again, I feel very fortunate. I often say to people, when you start martial arts, you don't know whether your instructor's good or bad because you don't know anything, right? You either listen to the crap they spiel or they're actually good. And I look back, and in judo, in Tino Hanchi, I was so fortunate to have the best possible start because he was nurturing, caring.
Yeah.
Back then, it wasn't taught for economic reasons. He used to collect rubbish bins and stuff and just teach karate before it became a bigger thing. Have luau's at his house on the weekend, and it was all about just being the best martial artist you could be.
That's awesome.
So, and then 1970, another friend I got to, of course, be friends with, Bob Jones, was a student of Tino's, 10 years older than me. Already had a phenomenal street fighting reputation because he ran security and did bodyguard work in Melbourne at the clubs. And so I started working, doing bouncing work or door work when I was still a teenager, and I always laugh. I say the discotheques. That dates me, doesn't it? People say, yeah, you understand. So I started working on the doors, and then in '70, Bob wanted to start his own system. Became like a bit like an American version of like an eclectic style where it wasn't just traditional karate, but we'd incorporate wrestling, boxing, a lot of stuff. And it was literally a precursor to MMA, because this is 1970, but we had to have it work because most of the students were doormen or bouncers or whatever. So you couldn't just go to the purely theoretical. I'm not saying all traditional arts are theoretical, but you know what I mean. So we had to incorporate a lot of what would actually work on the doors. So that was the start of that. 1978, Bob went over to America, met Chuck Norris, and talked Chuck into coming out to Australia to do some demos. Bob introduced kickboxing into Australia, and we were doing events, and I was demonstrating Sai and Okinawan weapons in each of the capital cities in Australia. So Chuck was demonstrating his martial arts, karate or Korean style of arts. We just became very close friends on that tour. He said, if you ever get to California, call me, we'll do some training. You can imagine a little kid in Croydon getting an offer like that, because Chuck was already very legendary, having done Enter the, Way of the Dragon with Bruce Lee and all that sort of stuff. I never thought I would get to the States, but that segues into another story, bodyguard work. But I ended up going there in '79, called Chuck, started training with him every morning, hence my presence in the US. And he just introduced me to Benny the Jet Urquidez, Fumio Demura, all these amazing martial artists. So that began a whole other chapter in my life.
And you were in The Octagon, right?
Yes, that was my first movie. Yeah.
That was the movie for my Gen X that got everybody into ninjas. It was like after that, ninjutsu was the craze. Everybody wanted to wear a ninja mask, and I know.
Well,
film.
He was in pre-production for The Octagon, and because he knew I could handle the weapons, he asked me if I'd play his nemesis. There was Tadashi Yamashita was Sakura, who used the kama and stuff, obviously Japanese. So the reason they came up with the crimson mask and everything was because technically I was supposed to be Asian. So they came up with it. It became like the Darth Vader of martial arts movies, right? Because I didn't speak, and they overdubbed this breathing, put it everywhere. I only did it once in a fight. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get a headache. But so that character, and then I was also a character called Long Legs, which is funny because my legs aren't long, but anyway. And a terrorist, and then four of us, including Aaron Norris, Chuck's brother, he was a stunt coordinator, and we did all the ninja work. So anytime there was a masked ninja going splat on the ground, it was probably me or one of us. So Keo was, and they didn't realize he was going to be that standout. It just, probably because of the costume, didn't speak. I got to choreograph a lot of the fights with Aaron and Chuck in Chuck's backyard. I've even got old black and white footage of that.
No, that's cool.
Because Chuck didn't use weapons, so there was katana or sword and sai. So we put that together and shot it in Indian Dunes. We shot that all night, and it turned out fantastic because it wasn't supposed to be too flashy or anything. Again, like we were talking about earlier, it was a little more traditional and to the point, with stances and everything else. And it came out incredibly well. And it even started a whole surge of sai, which for those who don't know, like a pronged Okinawan weapon. Yeah.
Three-pronged
like a
sword,
pitchfork. Yeah, there was a whole, because nobody had really seen that weapon on screen before. So
I remember that part. Someone, here, ninja.
Yeah, and it was, again, one of those early ninja films, so, and that's where I met Simon and Philip Ree, who are legendary Taekwondo instructors, and I just saw them the other day. It's great to still have friends after this amount of time. They were there, Gerald Okamura, there was a number of people, and it's then that being on the set, I was like, how good is this? I'm doing what I love, my passion, and I'm getting paid for it. And I'm getting to meet other amazing martial artists. So I was very aware of how fortunate opportunity. So I did, you know, quite a number of episodes of Walker as a guest star. And they wanted me to actually fight coordinate, but I was more interested at that stage on being in front of the camera. And auditioned for Force 5, which was the film that Joe Louis was in, legendary Joe Louis, karate fighter, not boxer. And that's where I got to work with Benny the Jet Urquidez. Started training with Benny at his brother Arnold's house. That's before the Jet Center was even there. Arnold's was Benny's older brother, who was renowned as one of the toughest martial artists around, training in this tin shed at the back of the house in the middle of summer. Oh my God, it was like trial by fire, but very old school training. You just sweated and trained. And so, you know, that started a whole relationship with Benny that's still to this day, you know. I ended up training at the Jet Center and training with Pete Cunningham, Sugarfoot.
Yeah.
Pete was, you know, undefeated, you know, he was Canadian,
With
born
Bill
in
Wallace,
Trinidad.
yeah.
Oh, just a phenomenal martial artist, and I trained with Petey for over 30 years. So I guess the industry just opened up so many doors. And I often say, you know, my whole passion in life was just to be the best martial artist I could be. Tons that are far better than me, some not as good, didn't matter. I just wanted to be the best version of me. And everything good in my life, including the 25 years of personal bodyguard work, and the movies, is all a result of that
drive.
with that drive, you know. And I thought, well, can't beat that. You know, I'm doing what I love and actually making a living out of it. So,
And then when you, like, I think you and I began with jiu-jitsu around the same year, 88. Back
yes.
when Horion had his garage on Red Beam was when I started. You met Henzo when he was a brown belt, and him and Hegan trained a lot together.
Yeah, well, the whole story of that started with Chuck going to Brazil for a holiday. He went there with Bob Wall and their wives. You remember Bob Wall, for those, again, who don't know. He was O'Hara, the guy with the scar, fought Bruce Lee. So they went for a holiday. Of course, Chuck, being a master, what do you guys do here? He ends up in, and I'm paraphrasing again, ends up in a jiu-jitsu school with Elio Gracie, Hickson, Hoist Gracie, who obviously was very young. You can imagine who's who, having a conversation, you know, and he got to, one of the funny stories is they start talking about jiu-jitsu, and of course, Horion would be pushing the efficacy of jiu-jitsu, and of course Elio, and apparently Bob, just out of the blue, suddenly threw a front kick at Hoist. Hoist, Chuck says, just jumps back. It was like, and Bob says, well, what would you do if somebody did that? You know, defending the karate sort of, you know, thing. And of course, Chuck said, he's going, oh, fuck no, you know. And Hickson stepped in front of Bob and basically said, why don't you try that on me? Because you're talking about the elite Hickson back in those days. And Chuck's like, oh, God. So anyway, that was, no, we just want to see what you guys do. So Chuck loves the story of having a little wrestle with Elio, who would have been in his 70s then. Chuck was a black belt in judo, so we all think, oh, we can grapple. What's this, you know? And he said he's on top of Elio, and Elio says, Chuck, throw a punch at me. And Chuck says, oh, Mr. Gracie, I can't do that. No, throw a punch at me. He said he half-heartedly threw a punch. Next thing he's got a cross-collar choke on him, blacked out. He said he couldn't eat for 2 days. Helio was known for being quite rough, right, with his submissions. So that was Chuck's intro, and I think he said he had a roll with Hickson and just was, you know, tied in 50,000 knots. So Chuck comes back from Brazil with the Vale Tudo tape. Again, for those who don't, it's almost precursor to MMA, no rules matches in Brazil, and it's Hickson's fight with Zulu. Do you remember those? So he brought it back, and because I was training with Chuck every morning, you know, we looked at that, and he's saying, wow, look at this stuff, you know. So out of that, I ended up trying to find, for whatever, I don't remember all the details. Horion was in town, rang Horion, said, I'd really love to see what you guys do. So that's how I got invited to the house where you were, and that would have been early 88, I would imagine. And I went to the house, and that's when I first, and I didn't know anything about any of these people, neither did anyone else here. And I met Hickson, And I said, oh, they knew a bit about that I was a stand-up background. So basically the first thing Hickson says in the lesson, he says, my friend, you want to put the gloves on? And thank God I was smart enough to say, no. I just want to see what you guys do.
Yeah,
So that's
exactly.
how that all started. And
Because a lot of guys would come there and challenge. Like,
yeah,
so they
no, and
were- yeah.
I've never been like that. I'm more like, I want to add, not instead of. I don't want to prove that
Yeah.
you guys are shit. And it wasn't about that. So, you know, and there were phenomenal lessons. And Hegan remembers, and we were saying, Hoxton,
Yeah.
right?
Hoxton, yeah.
Was only probably 6, and Hickson got him to put a choke on me, and I had to tap, of course, letting him do it.
Yeah.
And that was his way of showing me that jiu-jitsu is not about strength, it's about technical excellence, you know. I thought, how can I tell anybody a 6-year-old tap me out, for God's sake? I'm a black belt. So, you know, so I had these lessons, and it was the best experience ever. You know, Hickson was just, couldn't have been nicer, couldn't have been gentler. In fact, the first thing he wanted me to do when we started training, he says, do you know any moves? And I said, well, I did a bit of judo, yeah. I knew the old scarf hold, head arm, you know.
Yeah.
So he's lying on his back, he wants me to put it on him. I'm lying there, I'm spread out.
Says, harder.
I'm fucking sweating, squeezing, and Hickson says, my friend, can you squeeze any harder? You know, I should have got a warning clue with that, you know. And he sort of rolled backwards, you know, you put your feet in, it ends up in his stomach. I end up on my stomach with my arm up my back. So that was his way, again, of just introducing me the idea as far as grappling, they've got an answer to anything. And I still remember walking away that day. The other thing was, Hoist was there as a kid. I had to sit on Hoist and try and stay on the mount as we know it.
Try to hold him in.
Yeah, not strike or anything. And then he sat on me, both of which were impossible. And when I remember going home that day, driving home, going, I felt like a little baby on the ground with these guys.
Absolutely humble.
And I just went, I have to add this. The important thing, not do it instead of my strike, but add it to what I did. And so I started doing privates with Hickson for quite a while, ended up meeting Henzo Gracie. Henzo asked me, who are you training with? And I told him, he said, you need to meet my cousins, the Machados. Again, new to me. And as you know, they were in Redondo Beach in a house. It was Higan, John, and Carlos living there. John Jacques wasn't out yet. Hodger wasn't out yet. So I end up in the house and driving out there, and he introduced me. And because Henzo was still in Brazil, but he was going via LA when we met. And, you know, I just loved them, as you know. You couldn't
That
get
was
a
either
nicer
the garage
bunch.
on Avenue B or here.
Yeah, it might have been this house.
They
right
had
here.
one here in this
Yes.
spot.
Right in
Oh,
this
maybe,
spot.
maybe,
That house.
maybe
It was
here.
a tarp. This one wasn't wasn't enclosed, right?
No, it
It
was
just
not
like
enclosed. It had a roof
A roof.
with plastic. Or it was his garage on
No, it
Avenue
was in
B.
the garage.
It was the Avenue B one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Because when Henzo was there, the garage was on Avenue B.
Yeah, well, he didn't stop. He wasn't training then, you know, at that. He just introduced me, and of course, they just welcomed me with open arms. And I started my whole journey with them, which, as you know, Bob Bass and all legendary names, yourself being there. So that's how that all started. So I'm training with them, and that's when, and as you know, because of the connection with Horion and Chuck had invited the Gracies to teach at UFAF, which United Fighting Arts Federation was called then. It was an annual event where they'd have a 3-day seminar. So I invited them. I think it was Horion, Hickson, Pedro Sawyer was there.
Yes,
Maybe even Renato, and I know Carlos Machado was there, but he was just one of that group. So Chuck never actually got to know them. Cut to me training with the Machados. I said to Chuck, you've got to train with these guys. It's incredible. And he said, we'll invite them out to the house. We'll do a private. And he said, let's, get them for 2 hours. And I said, no, you don't want 2 hours, if you're going to wrestle. So Carlos, I know, came out. I'm sure Higan was there. And that was the whole start of the relationship with Chuck, because it was me training with them out, here, and telling Chuck, because again, his relationship was more with Horion and the Gracies at that stage. But then, of course, they're all in the same pot. But Machado's being such lovely people, he just took an immediate liking to them, and we had privates, and he came out to this garage one time. I know Chuck did. Yeah. So, and of course,
everybody was so fit back then. I just remember how fit everybody was, including me.
No, and it was such strict diet. I remember that, after each lesson was watermelon with the rind and all in the vitamizer, and you would drink it and all this sort of stuff.
Juice.
This is before they all became Americanized, but anyway. But it was, so that's how that relationship started with Chuck. I'm training with him, loved him, bring him out he was out in Tarzana at that stage. Mm-hmm. They came out, and it's, of course, and I would argue that to a certain degree, even to a degree, the Gracie and especially Machado's on the map is due to Chuck, because you know what it's like. You get somebody that's already so known in the martial arts circuit saying this new art, not new, but of jiu-jitsu. He was involved in demonstrations at shopping centers, newspaper articles, even television interviews. What better ad than that, than Chuck saying this is fantastic and giving basically a validation. So, and as you know, when he was doing Walker, Texas Ranger, Carlos moved to Texas.
Yep.
Still there. Yep. They formed a great relationship. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey. And it all started again way before the UFC and everything else. Jean-Jacques, I think, would have come out maybe 93.
Yep.
I would think.
He was the head coach at Baja Gracie, and then
right
before he came out.
Yeah, and because I remember when they started UFO, I was Jean-Jacques' interpreter because he couldn't speak English, and he always laughs. He said, somehow you knew what I was trying to say, I was describing a technique. So, and I ended up, because, again, getting the rest of the story. So we're training with them there. And Bob Wall would come and train with us. And Bob Wall managed 2 shopping centers in Encino, and Wall Street Plaza, one of them. And he was the one that, through us, offered them a space for their first academy. This was before they opened up out this way. Yep. And I know it was said that Chuck bought the place. He didn't buy it. Bob Wall managed it and offered them up rent-free space in this area. So that was the first academy in the Valley. And of course, we helped them with their residency and everything else. So the rest is history. It was, and I ended up, when Higan, the others moved to the beach area out, again, Redondo, Hermoso area, Jean-Jacques stayed in the Valley. And so I ended up staying with Jean-Jacques for, 30 years or something, or close to, just because I lived in the Valley. Because when Chuck moved to Tarzana, we were very close friends, and he was the one who encouraged Judy and I to move there. So we ended up buying an apartment in Reseda and then in Encino, just to be out where he was.
And so you moved back to Australia just before COVID?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much as COVID hit. And we were back in Australia, and of course it looked like we had the toughest lockdowns of anywhere in the world, especially in Melbourne.
Melbourne was...
You could only go out for 2 hours a day for essentials, things like pharmacy or doctors or whatever. They even had people randomly checking houses to make sure you were home.
Really?
Wow.
Oh, it's like a police state. It was ridiculous, right?
Wow. Yeah.
In hindsight, again, nobody knew.
Yep.
It was like
No
totally
one
going to kill everybody on the planet.
First,
so I would argue, well, if you didn't know what we know now, what steps would you take to protect the community? So
I was in Australia when it hit the U.S., and Trump put out a tweet that he might shut down a country, and every American, I was immediately, get me to the airport. I got to go home now because otherwise I'll get stuck here. And I
oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
It was the weirdest, like the plane ride home was packed, of course. No one has on a mask yet and all that. When we land, they just waved us through right into the parking lot. It was the weirdest exit of a plane I ever had.
Well, it was illegal for us to go out without a mask. You could get fined.
Right. It got strict. You guys got really strict.
Yeah.
England was pretty strict too.
Yeah, a lot of places. And again, it was just out of fear. And, and as I said, I get it. Now, I'm not pro-vaccine. I was then, because I figured, well, if it's going to stop the severity and or The trouble is, they said it would also help stop you infecting others or getting
Right.
infected. Well, that wasn't
That
true.
part wasn't true. Yeah.
But, you know, that being, and I got 3 vaccinations. I had to travel, as you know. You couldn't travel after a while anyway.
I got all mine. I'm not against anyone who's against vaccines, but
Chris just likes shots.
I don't mind shots at all.
He likes pain. He likes to get stabbed with those needles.
I feel like my whole life I've been getting shots. And in the military, I was a medic. It's like, just give me another shot.
The fact that you like it is quite disturbing.
Yeah.
You know.
He's disturbing, right?
Yeah, but so that sort of covers that history, and yeah, it goes. And so I've got clubs in Australia, Team Norton, BJJ, it should be Team Norton JJ. We're talking about
Whatever
the
you
idea
wanna
of using,
call it
but
is
yeah,
fine.
no, I'm just still teaching lots of seminars and still involved, and just absolutely love it. So it's been an interesting journey, and yeah.
That's a beautiful story of following your passions and having it lead to opportunities. And it's the combination of following your passion and being a pleasant person that people want to be around. You can't just follow your passions and be an a-hole. You got to follow your passions
Although
and be...
these days there's some passion-filled assholes who
Yeah.
become
no
very
question.
successful.
I guess that's
No
true.
question about it. And we know who they are, and we won't even get into it. But yeah, especially martial arts.
Yes.
People start to believe their own press, and
They
suddenly
do.
I can behave a little differently from everybody else. And, that's the thing about being a role model. I realize, sometimes you become a role model whether you like it or not. Like a lot of, even say, basketball players, they'll misbehave and they'll say, oh, but you're a role model for these younger kids. And I say, well, I never wanted to be a role model. Well, if you're a Van Damme or a Seagal or you're a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, whatever it is, you are a role model.
You're
And
gonna
I
be a
believe you
role
have an
model.
obligation to behave a certain way whenever possible as an example for the kids, especially in martial arts. Because this is why one of my favorite mantras is, it's not the 2 hours on the mat that matters, it's the 22 hours off the mat. Like, people can be on the mat, and a lot of them, us included, sometimes just actors will role play, do this, snap to attention. And off the mat, people can be complete dicks, with the way they behave, their friends and their integrity and all of that. And I just think that's so important,
Yeah, I think so. I've always wondered if because I'm in martial arts, I've always perceived what I call an integrity problem in martial arts. I wonder if it's in other things like volleyball or
I'm
if
sure
it's,
it is. You hear about
It's
sexual
everywhere,
We see it
harassment.
in soccer. We see it with our
Yeah,
playing
bullying
soccer.
and everything.
Yeah.
No, it's a mini philosophy. There's still a power structure, and you want to be here, and you want to be
The
here.
referees cheat, though. That's what I was
Yeah.
referring to. Like,
All right.
they want their team to win, and they're making bad calls
Yeah.
for our team. Like, that's
Yeah.
an integrity issue.
It sure seems like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's as you would argue, it's not for us to go, well, everybody else is like that, so I can be a dick
Right,
too.
right.
No, you're obliged to
Then
be
the
true
whole world
and
is
represent
fucked,
what you think it should. It's like giving away belts, giving away rank, the whole plethora of things that I think we're obligated to only grade students to the level they're absolutely worthy of.
Yep.
Because rank is still really only valid within your school.
Right.
Because the next school teaching the same style could have a whole different standard of what they
Yes.
expect,
Yes.
right? So it's an indicator, but still you want to give a person a black belt so they did visit another school, they walk in with their head held high and not walk out going, oh, I suck, right?
Yeah.
That's not fair, and that's our obligation as an instructor to say, no, you are within reason this accepted standard of rank, I think that's important.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough that in the last 20, 30 years, I've done enough seminars, traveling, rolling with people from Europe to Asia to the Midwest, the U.S., everywhere, where I feel like I have a pretty good feel of rank. And we have guys who come here who've been held back very unfairly, and guys who've been promoted too fast, very
Yeah, and as you would know, if it's a very competitive school, they want to put a blue belt that's really a brown belt in the blue belt division because they win. So that's also that's lacking integrity.
That's lacking
for
integrity.
me,
I think so, yeah.
But
I'm the 5-time world blue belt champion. It's like,
You
no,
want
we're
to
purple
be.
belts.
yeah, no, exactly right. And I think I've been lucky to have good role models like Benny the Jet. We mentioned Benny the Jet Urquidez. He's one of my few role models because he really lives what he preaches. You know, loves his art. Benny's.
I'm trying to think of that movie that he was in because I'm old now. It seems like I want to say a couple of years ago. I was probably 15.
Jackie Chan movie.
No, it was. I think it was the last movie he was in. Cusack, or that guy plays a guy who goes back to high school.
Yeah, they have a great fight in this.
They have a great fight. Yeah.
Well, John Cusack is a student of Benny's. Been for many years. He's a big guy, John Cusack. In fact, we met him not all that long ago. I was like,
because he doesn't look big on film.
No, he's big. He's 6'3", 6'4",
Wow,
and a big guy. Plus, Benny says he's the real. Benny said he's one of the few people he trains that he has to tell him to ease off on the kicks. That's how powerful he is. He said he could get in the ring with anybody and do well. And I remember that fight with John Cusack.
That was a great fight. It was quick, but it was a well choreographed fight.
Yeah, and of course the Meals on Wheels or Wheels on Meals, Meals on Wheels, one of those Jackie Chan. That's still a lot of people regard as one of the best fights.
I was about to say, to me, that's when I found out about Benny.
Yeah.
I still think that's like one of the best fight scenes ever.
So Benny, you know, and again, he doesn't brag, he doesn't boast, but he's just a warrior, you know. And if you challenge him, he will absolutely fight you.
And he was
but he
tough
would
in
never
his
challenge anybody else. And as he did all his fighting in the ring, you know, and you learn a lot from people. I was in the Jet Center when I think there was a couple of European champions and wanted to spar Benny. Ruben Urquidez, his brother who trained Benny, was outside and we're watching. And this European kid's like hip throwing Benny, and even Ruben's going, Sensei, you're right there, meaning he wanted Benny to unload on him. And afterwards, we're talking, Benny's like, what? He said, I get paid to fight, you know? He said, I don't have to prove I'm Benny the Jet every time I get in the ring. It showed a level of integrity and
a lack of ego.
A lack of ego and just a level that he's at, because I wouldn't do it. If somebody was starting to unload, even if I was going to get beaten, I'd be like, oh, well, fuck you, you know? Right? And I just thought little lessons like that are fantastic from people like Benny. And of course, you know, Chuck's still a friend. You know, he was best man at Judy and my wedding. And I often say the reason for that is in case anyone started shit at the reception. But, you know, he's just a lovely man. He's just helped me so much with my career and martial arts. He introduced me to Bill Wallace and all these amazing other martial artists that I would never have really got to meet as an Aussie just being in the country. Open doors. So, you know, I'll never forget that. Fumio Demura, there's just been some incredible people that I've managed to hang with.
And you ended up like, your filmography is like 30 movies, right? I mean, you've
100 now.
Yeah, you've been in a lot of movies.
Yeah.
So like, over those years, is there certain films that like really stand out to you as the experience of the film is something that was really impactful in your life, or?
Yeah, no, a lot of them were, but you know, when I started, there were very few of us, as in martial arts, doing movies. Like it was, you know, Bruce Lee had sort of made it public. Then you have Chuck.
He's the one who.
There was a few, but not like today. And I would always argue back then, we were martial artists who did movies, and we did martial arts to be a martial artist. Nowadays, a lot of people train martial arts because they want to be actors. You know, they want to be that next Jean-Claude Van Damme or whatever.
You got to have that on your acting resume.
Yeah, so you know, being what I said about what my passion was, when Chuck got me started, did Walker, did Force 5, that was first lead. That was when I went, oh, why not, you know? And then I did a number of films for Roger Corman. I filmed in Thailand and the Philippines. Pat Johnson, who's no longer with us, was an ex-partner of Chuck's in schools. He recommended to Jackie Chan that I'd be a good one for him to use. I was actually, you know, personal bodyguard for Linda Ronstadt in Japan, and I got a call, and this Asian lady says, "Oh, Jackie wants you to come to Hong Kong, work with him in a movie. What's your price?" I went, "Hold on, what?" You know? Yeah, and she says again, "What's your price?" I said, "Well, but when does he want me?" "Oh, you need to be here in 3 days." And of course, I said, "Well, I can't. I'm on this tour. You know, we're traveling all over the world. So I thought that was the end of it. Then they recontacted me without going into all the details, wanted me to go to Hong Kong, and I thought, okay, off I went. And again, Pat had recommended me, there's a film called Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars. And you're asking me what stands out. That stands out from the mere experience, because you'll never have an experience like doing Hong Kong movies back then.
Jackie Chan was absolutely amazing.
Well,
like
yeah,
an
and
acrobat.
people often say, "Oh, how did you feel going to work with Jackie Chan?" I said, "Well, I really didn't. I didn't watch those sort of movies, even though I'm in martial arts. That wasn't my thing." Right. So I said, for me, it was just a gig, and I'll go and I'll work 8 hours a day. Well, I get there, of course, and when the fight stuff starts, and I kid you not, literally 17, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
Which was like, what the? Luckily, I was in, obviously a lot younger and in good shape, and I could deal with that. And incredible experience, more later than then, because it's only later, even 20 years later, I was working on Suicide Squad, and a couple of stunt people knew of the movies, because I did 5 movies in Hong Kong. I was the only Westerner to ask back more than once to do a movie with him at that stage.
Because they work so hard.
Well, and they knew, it was more that I got some advice from this legendary Japanese actor, Kurata-san, who saw me getting a little frustrated. I had a fight scene with Sammo Hung, who's legendary director, actor, and he could see the frustration. He pulled me aside and basically said, Rich, he said, let me give you some advice. If you want to do movies here, he said, don't say anything. This is their set, their movie. If they want 30 takes, which is what you always had to do, just do it. And I took that advice. So I believe it's not because I had abilities nobody else had, obviously. It's just that after that movie, I took all the bumps. I didn't mind getting hit. I was used to contact, which was excessive in the movies back then. I mean, when Sammo sidekicked me up against this wall 30 times, I was like, one of those squid in the water that do this and shoot ink. I was like, man, and I got hit with bare-fisted uppercuts. But again, I was fine. I said to Sammo, as long as I can hit you back twice as hard, and he was phenomenal. So I think they got me because I would shut up, because they'd get a lot of Westerners that Jackie would say, oh, they want to show me how tough they are and all this. He said, I've been hit by everybody. I'm not interested in that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So the fact that I also had the timing. Jackie did a great little clip where he talked about me, about my timing. That was paramount to them, because they had a particular style of choreography. By the way, it's not that I'm smart enough to fit into their timing. It just happened that I had the timing. Yeah. So I think they just called me back because I knew how they worked. They knew I could act. They knew I could handle whatever the choreography was. Excuse me, and I would just shut up and do it. So I got quite a number of movies. And again, it's when you talk to people in the stunt industry that worship those days, and their eyes are like this when you're talking about Sammo Hung and Jackie and all this, and you realize, wow, how fortunate to have been a part of that era. Yeah. That Bruce Lee era, as it were. And so they stand out for reasons. There's a couple of movies I did that are more dramatic work, which is not per se my thing, that stand out just because it was a challenge in a whole different way. There's a movie I'm set to start soon called Sacrifice. I'm playing a military dad, lifetime military. He's got PTSD. Well, you being military, you get all of this. He's on medication, and he's got a son and a daughter. It's not the lead, but they sent me the script and said, would you do it? I said, the only reason I'm saying yes is I have no fucking idea how I'd play this role, because there's no action, it's complete drama, totally out of the comfort zone. I said, I want to do it. But anyway, he did not give away the whole story, but halfway through the movies, he finds out his son's a sergeant in the military. He finds out his son's gay. So it's a very topical thing, and he's vehemently against gays in the military, and there's some phenomenal emotional scenes. So it's scary, but it's the challenge. And I love those sayings. There's a couple of sayings I love telling students that that one of them is, fear keeps people ordinary.
Yes, it does.
Like, it's so easy for me when I got off to say, oh, well, that's not what I do. I'm a little uncomfortable with that. The trick is to go, yes, wake the spirit up, and then figure out how you're going to do it. Like you would know as such a competitor. I mean, I would imagine you're fearful every time, probably on the mat. Gee, will I get beaten in 2 seconds? Will I look like a dick in front of my friends? Or will I, you know, I mean, that's natural.
I think people's biggest fear is being embarrassed in front of their peers. That's
100%.
people's biggest fear.
100%.
More than getting hurt or anything like that. Just don't make me feel shame.
Yeah, even Nicole Kidman, I saw a interview she did about, she tries to now only take roles that she's scared of or fearful. Because she said for so long, she was so scared when she get there, they'd find out that she actually didn't have a clue about what she was doing. So I think we all feel fear, which is the Customato. I don't know whether it's his saying, you know, Tyson's trainer who said, fear is the friend of extraordinary people. And the extraordinary part for me is that you feel the fear, but you do it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's what, because again, as we know, jiu-jitsu is the worst. If you're worried about being uncomfortable, there's going to be times you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to get some moose on top of you, somebody much better than you, somebody that's throttling you. Uncomfortable, but that's absolutely the growth. So, you know, that's where life is for me. Even the bodyguard work, you know, was an interesting, because, you know, as you know, I started with the Rolling Stones in '73. Used to teach Mick Jagger karate at 4 o'clock in the morning after a show. Go figure. And that was phenomenal. We'd train those and then work with David Bowie for 8 years. Stevie Nicks on the tours and all that.
Bowie.
Wow.
Yeah. Linda Ronstadt and James Taylor. Train them on the road, personal bodyguard for them. But just to have that experience and again to share some of this knowledge. But the point of it is there are so many times you would see a situation that would just make your legs shake, you know. A friend of mine in England who I just worship, Jeff Thompson, he's wrote books about fear. He was a doorman in Coventry, roughest, had hundreds of fights. And he's a wonderful writer. And he basically said, anyone who says they don't feel fear is either lying or they're stupid.
Right.
And it's true, right? It's just what you do with it. And
quite often, Americans don't really grasp that. Like in England and Australia, when you bounce, you have to do the role of the cop too. Because over here, bouncer goes, "Oh, call the cops," and they come in. You guys have to do all that once they cross that line into the pub for old pub law or something like that.
no, and the other thing is, and the difference between, say, the self-defense we'd teach an average civilian, whether it's in jiu-jitsu or karate or whatever, reality-based, is your obligation is to disengage, should you be able to. It's not to get into an ego battle. And I would argue there's times I might be with Judy or there might be kids and I need to be the sheepdog and stand my ground. That's why we need the tools. But your obligation is not to do this. But if you're working on the doors like I did, or you're a personal bodyguard and you've got Stevie Nicks standing near Linda, I can't go, "Oh, fuck this, I'm out of here."
Right.
Right? This is too hairy. You have to stand your ground. So, you know, and that can, depending on what you're up against, you know, that can be a pretty scary time. But it's also very educational, because that's when another favorite saying I have of Napoleon said that confidence is a factor of preparation. And he was talking about war. The more prepared you are for the war, the better you are at it.
Right.
Or as a cop, like actually knowing jiu-jitsu help you to de-escalate, talk your way down. Most people, as you know, will just react out of fear with a violent response. So even doing the job and just knowing with the self-talk that I've got the background, I've got the training, I've got the skill set, I'm okay. And then deciding that you're going to do it anyway. I mean, I always work with Bob Jones, who I'd learned so much from, because obviously he was a seasoned street fighter. But, you know, I did it for 20, 25 years. So it was, again, an education in a whole different way.
Yeah, I find your story very inspirational, and I've been hanging out with him for a long time, and he always talks
I'm sorry about that. But
Yeah, I know. Well, he talks about like the reality versus fantasy martial arts, and like having to kind of make a choice if he was going to do something in the movie industry, that it would have to be more fantasy. But I find, listening to your story, it sounds like you really accomplished having a blend. You did it all. You were able to stay real and true to your own training and have this awesome career in film.
Yeah, and necessary training considering doing that work because, as we were talking earlier, karate, there's a lot of theory, there's art, which is beautiful. Otherwise, if if you're only going to do karate, jiu-jitsu for the self-defense or the combative aspects, I said this at UFAF, won a couple of hundred black belts. I said, put up your hand who's had a street fight in the last 3 months. Nobody puts up their hand. So I'd say, well, if that's the only reason you're training, you're kind of wasting a lot of time. Like then, if you're not doing it for the mind, body, the spiritual, to sound a bit cliche, but then why do yoga? Why do so many things? There's so many other reasons for doing what we do. Right. The byproduct should be hopefully that you have the skill set then in the real world and understand that world because, as a cop, it's so different, We line up and we bow and we step back and we shape up. Well, that's consensual sparring. Yep. I've agreed to spar you, slap fists on the mats, we roll. There's rules. There's a professor, a sensei to stop you in the street. As you know, no rules. It could be 2, 3, 4. There's a lot of violence in Melbourne, where I live now, with machetes, all sorts of stuff. So I believe we have an obligation to also teach that side of the art that will benefit. But I guess the point I'm at now, and I remember seeing a nice talk by Hickson about where he's at now. Obviously, he's got some medical issues, but forget that. The warrior Hickson at an advanced age, he said, it's not about combat anymore. So I would say to students, just think about, when somebody says, oh, will this karate or would Team Norton BJJ work for self-defense or whatever? I'd say, well, what are you talking about? That 1 in a million street fight, if you're not a professional having to do it. I would argue the self-defense that I do it for is hardening of the arteries, stiff muscle joints, muscles that are out of whack, Alzheimer's, a healthy heart. That's the self-defense I'm getting from my art, and a lot of it can be theoretical, but that's okay. That's a beautiful part. Like jiu-jitsu, you don't want to be in a half guard on the ground in the street, even though you can be choking the crap out of this person and his girlfriend or his two mates are kicking your head in. It's illogical.
Kind of a fantasy aspect.
No, exactly, and that's sport, right? Which is fine. It's incredible, but think about, as I'd say, in the moment problem solving. Gee, you're not thinking about next week's rent or what you're doing tomorrow. That's so healthy for us because we're multitasking. We're on the phone, we're trying to drive. Judy has got me for that. I don't do it often. But you know what I mean? So they're the health benefit. That's the self-defense I'm getting. I'm defending myself against the ravages of aging, which are inevitable. Just how can I mitigate it, And people say, oh, how come you're still training and doing seminars at 75? And I say, well, this shit doesn't happen by accident. You got to work at it. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to keep him working.
Yeah, earning money. That's the main thing. Yeah.
You're my hero.
Well, and but it keeping healthy diet. We follow Wim Hof. We do the Wim Hof breathing. Take cold showers every day. We fast. We do the all of that stuff.
And eating healthy. It's eating healthy too. You gotta talk to him.
I love eating healthy. I just want an ice cream afterwards.
Or you want to eat fat burger and wiener schnitzel on the same day. In the same
all right,
day.
this is over. This interview's over. I'm disgusted. I find that so disturbing. Yeah, but it's just being the best version of us, right? No, and I'm not as strict. I was fanatical in my 30s, even 40s and 50s. I used to only eat 6 days a week. I would do 3 times a year, do a 10-day water fast. Ooh. Distilled water and a tiny bit of honey, not eat anything for 10 days. Now we do more the 18.
You would get so lean, I bet.
Oh, yeah. What's then you're talking about rather than... Thanks very much, Chris. Yeah. No, I just found it just made sense. And I started when I was 14 years of age fasting before it was in vogue. There was a guy called Paul Bragg who wrote a book called The Miracle of Fasting. And I read it and I was like, rotating foods, all this stuff, giving the body a physiological rest to allow cleansing of the cells, all that sort of crap. So, I started when I was incredibly young. And
when I was in high school, I briefly did to cut weight for wrestling, and then I found that whole aesthetic, stoic feeling of like You would feel empowered when you're hungry and reject food. That whole mental part of it.
Well, there's also a lot of people
I
who
hate
used
it
to
now.
say to me, "Oh, you'll get weaker." I said, "No, the opposite is true." Because you think about a hunter and gatherer. Well, look at a lion. When you see, they say a lion are lucky, happy to catch prey every 3 days. So they're fasting. Hunters and gatherers. If you didn't have, Uber delivery or whatever, and you had to go and actually spear whatever you're going to eat or dig it up, you might not eat for days. And if you, after 2 days, if you lost mental clarity through this, you're definitely going to die.
Yep. You're
Opposite,
dead.
you actually get more because that's your survival system kicking in. You've got to be sharp because
Everything
you're
gets
desperate.
very clear when you haven't eaten for a while. Yep.
Exactly. And I used to train still 6 days a week without food, and it never affected me, I'm a bit like you now. It's more about smell the roses time, but I'm still good. My wife is a very strict vegan, so I very seldom eat meat. And again, I still do. She won't give me a hard time with that. There's different reasons people
It's
have.
definitely healthier for the
No
planet.
wiener schnitzel
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
fat burger.
Smell
Yeah.
the roses and the fat burger and Lucky
Yeah,
Charms.
no offense to your fat burger that
You're
you
gonna
like to
smack
eat.
me.
Come on, it's on. But
Smack that fat burger out of me.
but yeah, so I don't know. It's just and the good thing for my life is, as I say, I'm writing a book at the moment because so many people have said, "Oh, you need to write a book," and I said, "Okay." Especially with the rock and roll, with traveling with Bowie and all these people. Obviously, I knew everything that went on in the tour. I said, "You want me to write about the sex, drugs, and rock and roll?" I said, "I would never do that. I'm not going to be the chauffeur or the butler that tells all," because I was really got to be close friends, not just somebody that stood around. And so I said I wouldn't divulge any of that stuff. But I thought about it, and I thought, well, an interesting book would be lessons, what I call lessons learnt from people at the top of their game. Meaning, I realized that I learned so much from being around, say, a David Bowie or a Mick Jagger, for instance, or a Jackie Chan or a Chuck Norris. All these sorts of people, where you go, what's their behavior? What are the symptomatic behaviors of them that allow them to achieve those levels? And so that's what the book is about. And I learned so many lessons. Sometimes in the moment, like they would do something and say something, go, "Oh, wow." And sometimes it's 3 years later. It could be, you hear people sometimes say, "Oh, Dad used to always say, and I never got it, but now I understand." Yeah. So I'm calling the book In the Moment with Hindsight. Meaning, and the idea of the book is not to write about Richard Norton, who gives a flying. It was more, to me, relating it very much back to martial arts, of lessons I've learnt from these people that I could then have a reader read a chapter, read the lesson I'm talking about, and realize they can apply that lesson to their own life.
Yeah.
It might be, I'll give you an example. It could be like Keith Richards. I saw him he was asked a question about Jumping Jack Flash. "Oh, do you ever get sick of playing Jumping Jack Flash?" And he basically said, "No." He said, "Because I'm still learning how to play it." He said, "You might think it's the same every time, but I'm always trying a way to hit a note a little differently." But I thought, oh, fuck, that's mind-blowing, right? Because that's what we're trying to do. Yeah. I often said, I don't want to be the same martial artist I was 5 years ago. What's a slightly different expression of what I do, which keeps it interesting? Mm-hmm. And you might go back to what you did, but there's parallels like that, you know.
I love those parallels, where but boxes and boxes.
Yeah.
Whenever you think you found the answer, you got 3 more questions to pursue.
Yeah, the last one, because I know we're going to wrap up soon. It's probably boring you guys, but I was with Linda Ronstadt and one of her singers in the car, and there was a radio on this very, what's the word, whatever song, what do they call it? It's almost manufactured music.
Right.
They were bagging it, and going, this shit is horrible. I said, I kind of like it. It's, it's catchy and all that. And you know what she said to me? She basically said, just because it's popular doesn't mean it's good. That resonated, because look at martial arts. There's so many martial art brands through great marketing and everything have phenomenal followings, but it's shit, it's never going to work. You want to put a sticker on a student's head, please don't try this outside. You're going to get your ass kicked. But, you know, there's a way, so just because, it's all those little lessons. Or Mick Jagger, there's not, he knew where every cent was spent on that tour. I mean, so on, fit. David Bowie was the same, because I love that I got to know the actual person, not the persona they put on stage. Because Bowie was Ziggy Stardust. It's an act, you know. He was like just a cultured English gentleman off the stage. James Taylor, I mean, a beautiful man. We spent time, you know, I flew to Sydney. He was in Australia recently. I haven't seen James in, I don't know, 10 years, but I worked with James for 14 years. You know, I was with him when he was married to Carly Simon, and, you know, he's still singing, he's still got an amazing career. And just to sit in that room with James and realize what a close friendship. So we chatted for 3 hours. That's and awesome, he was lovely, you know. And again, it sounds like I'm bragging. I mean, it's not, it's martial arts, but he literally said, if I hadn't met you, he said, I'd probably be dead, you know, because he had drugs, thing, and I'm not giving that away because he's very public about that. Hasn't touched anything in 35 years. He said, exercise became my addiction. How cool is that, cool, you know, and just to have those relationships. So again, I would still get back to that theme when we wrap up, that it's just martial arts. And I, you know, as I said, I'm just still trying to be, people always say, oh, well, could you beat Scott Atkins? Or like, who gives a, you know, it's not about that. There's people that could tie me in. Look at Jiu-Jitsu. If I was to wrestle Jean-Jacques O'Hagan, I mean, forget about it, even though I've been doing 35 years. I love that, though, because you go, I've still got so much further I can go, you know? And you got to be comfortable with all of that.
Absolutely. That's some wise advice. And what an amazing life you've lived.
Yeah, very fortunate.
And what I also really like is like they say, you know, that you got to give back, and you've lived a life of giving back to people, which is awesome.
Yes, and again, going back to say Tina Seberano and all that, you see that in the really good instructors. It's just about how can I make that person better through my knowledge. I mean, it's not.
I was going to say earlier when you were talking about belting students, your concern was that like the student's self-esteem might be harmed if they go out there and they're like belted too high for their level or whatever. I don't know if I've ever heard a martial arts instructor talk about it from that vantage point. I've heard a lot of martial arts instructors say like, oh, I don't want somebody out there with my label on their back showing up with the belt that's too high or whatever like that. I've never heard someone say it like that, and that's such a that feels a lot more correct.
But it's ego. I mean, including some top martial arts, it's about ego gratification. But I would say 2 dozen people in a room at a party, no gi, nothing that says you. What would say to the average person that you're a martial artist? Surely it would be your courtesy, the way you listen, the way you interact, and all of that. They're the qualities, you know, that are important. And we need to instill that in our students, because again, the original even karate was never about hurting people. It was about self-defense. It was about trying to nullify an attacker and not hurt them. Of course, easier said than done, as we know. But I think, you know, it's important for us to keep those values and instill them in the student. You know, back in Tino's day, if he heard any one of us, God, I didn't, but get in an actual street fight, no matter whether you were at a big lineup, you had to spar every student in that room, finishing up with him, because you want to know there's consequences for that, that I really want you to think about how you're using what I'm teaching you. How good is that, you know? Or if I'm sparring, if you ever accidentally hit him too hard, because as you know, it's more point sparring, that sort of karate, you go, oh, sensei, sorry, blah, 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 grovel on the ground, the glasses would go back and you would get thumped. Because he said, if you're going to actually do that to me, then what about a lower belt student or anything else? And you remember that sort of stuff, and they're almost obscure lessons that I believe
character building. amazing.
And I've learned to be very tolerant and patient with Judy, my wife. I mean, you know what I mean? It's hard work. It's hard work. I believe it's a karmic debt I'm paying off. So I feel good about
I
that.
feel your pain.
Yeah, yeah. I'll cop it later, but that's all right. Hey, it's worth, well, bring it on.
You're in trouble after you get
That's right. That's right.
Right on. Well, I think in closing, we want to thank you for your contribution to martial arts and for continuing to be such a good person for everybody to know. And we look
Thank
forward to
you.
reading your book. And
Yeah.
um,
If it ever gets finished, but
Yeah.
hopefully.
And hopefully, if you're thinking the world's in a bleak place, be a positive person to make it more positive. If you're thinking the world's already positive, don't be a jerk and fuck it up.
there you go.
No, exactly, and yes, and you know, it's Eckhart Tolle. Do you know Eckhart Tolle?
Well,
We
I
just
do.
love
Yeah, I
listening
love
to him
Eckhart
in the moment, the power of now, and basically said if you're going to have a prayer, you know, with your spiritual religious, even if the only prayer each day is just thankful, I'm thankful. That's pretty cool, right? Because there is a lot. The fact that we're just sitting here now doing this, I mean, how good is this?
How lucky
right?
are we? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and to just look at the upside of stuff and not always dwell in the negative past. I mean, yeah, it's a good place to be. And of course, we get upset. I don't get upset. I got to finish off with telling I was doing a podcast in my office, and they were talking about martial arts and how it applies to your life, spirituality. I said, no, it's important to just be calm, and you know, if you're driving, just if it's traffic, just appreciate the moment. So I hang up, I get out. This one says to me, geez, you talk shit. She said, geez, you talk shit. I want to meet that guy. She knows what I'm like in the car, you know. I said, well, I can't help it if everyone else in the road's a fucking idiot. It's not my fault, you know. Oh, it's very funny.
What about when we were here last time? And
Oh, no, well, that's too long a story. But yeah, there was another little altercation that I got. It's a long story, but it's just so funny afterwards. I get home. And this is what I teach: is anger, you know, management of situations, legal ramifications of force. This one, and it didn't get to that, but it could have been, you know, because I wanted to punch this guy in the head in this traffic thing. And Judy says, I think you mismanaged that. Mismanaged it. Oh, well.
Yes.
Yep.
That's the hardest thing.
That's-
Running across people who desperately need to get punched and
They
not
do.
doing it.
They do. That's our job. But
Yeah.
our wives keep us real, right? They keep us grounded and earth.
Nice.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
thanks so much for coming out and
Yes,
doing our
you're
show. This
welcome.
is awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks
Totally
again.
amazing.
Fun.
On 3,
So we say pound, like, and subscribe, and we look at that camera on 3.
3, 2, 1.
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Pound, like, and subscribe.
Oh man, I missed the finger.
That's all good.
I messed up again.
Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, you.
Well, we all have targets on our backs these